The morning sun shone brightly over the city, its warm rays piercing through the curtains of Angela's small living room. She opened her eyes, finding the still unopened boxes stacked in the corners. After years of studying and preparing, he had finally managed to graduate from the police academy, a dream cultivated since childhood. Your new journey would begin today in a new neighborhood full of opportunities and challenges. Although a little apprehensive about the change, Angela felt confident that her commitment to justice and her determination would guide her down the right path. After all, protect and serve was more than a motto, it was a calling that resonated in his heart. After drinking a hot cup of coffee, she got ready to enjoy her first day off exploring the neighborhood. The streets were busy, with residents coming and going, children playing in the playgrounds and traders opening their stores. A smile appeared on his lips as he felt the welcoming warmth of the community. Suddenly, the flashing lights of a police cruiser caught his attention. Two officers approached, their faces tense and suspicious. "Good morning, ma'am. Could you show us your documents?" demanded the oldest, Sergeant Collins. Angela blinked, confused. "Of course, officers. I'm just moving to this neighborhood and haven't had time to update my documents yet. My identity and hands where I can see them," Collins interrupted, his voice thick with hostility. Officer Baker, his partner, already had his hand on the butt of the gun. Angela's heart skipped a beat. What was supposed to be a casual encounter was quickly turning into a tense and dangerous situation. "Officers, please, there is no need for violence. I'm a newly qualified police officer and..." "You're a criminal until proven otherwise," Collins spat. "Now turn around and put your hands on your head." Swallowing hard, Angela obeyed, feeling the cold of the cuffs around her wrists. His eyes burned with tears of humiliation and anger. How could she be treated this way when all she wanted was to serve and protect? At that moment, reality hit her like a punch in the stomach. Her black skin, which should have been a source of pride, now made her a target of suspicion and prejudice. But she would not allow this injustice to define her or divert her from her path. "Officers, my name is Angela Harris. I am a recently graduated police officer and I personally know Captain Harris, head of this department," she stated firmly, lifting her chin. Collins and Baker's eyes widened, shock evident on their faces. Suddenly, the handcuffs were removed and a stream of apologies began to pour from their mouths. But Angela wasn't interested in his baseless explanations. She knew that this incident was not an isolated case, but rather a symptom of a much larger problem rooted in the system. And she was determined to be the change she longed to see. As the officers walked away, heads bowed in shame, Angela looked around, taking in the worried faces of the residents who had witnessed the scene. She knew she had a long way to go, but she also knew she wasn't alone on this journey. The community was by his side, looking forward to better and fairer days. With firm steps, Angela moved forward, her heart burning with a new mission. She would bring light to the darkness, exposing the corruption and prejudice that plagued the police department. And above all, she would fight for a police force worthy of trust and respect, one in which everyone, regardless of race or background, could feel safe and protected. Weeks passed, and Angela devoted herself to meticulously documenting every detail of the incident with Officers Collins and Baker. She knew that exposing this injustice would be just the first step in an arduous but necessary journey to reform the police department. One morning, Angela walked through the familiar hallways of the police station, determination written all over her face. She knocked on Captain Harris' office door, taking a deep breath before entering. The captain, a middle-aged man with a sharp gaze, looked up from his desk littered with papers. "Angela, what can I do for you?" he asked, his deep voice resounding through the room. Bluntly, Angela placed the dossier on the table. "Captain, I need to report a serious incident involving two of your officers. They approached me in an aggressive and unwarranted manner, clearly motivated by racial prejudice." Captain Harris frowned, his eyes scanning the pages as Angela narrated the shocking details. His face took on a grim expression, and he shook his head in disappointment. "I'm deeply sorry for what happened, Angela. Unfortunately, this type of behavior is nothing new to me," he admitted ruefully. "I have tried to reform this department since I took charge, but the culture of corruption and prejudice has been ingrained for years." Angela nodded, understanding the magnitude of the challenge they faced. I understand, Captain. But we can't give up. If we don't do something now, this injustice will continue to perpetuate itself, tarnishing the reputations of all of us. Captain Harris studied her for a long moment. Then a flash of determination flashed in his eyes. You're right, Angela. It's time for us to take decisive action. I promise to support you in this battle, but we will need solid evidence and the support of the community. Over the next few weeks, Angela dedicated herself to gathering evidence, documenting every instance of misconduct and bias that came to her attention. She also strived to build bridges with community leaders, sharing their concerns and seeking their support in the fight for change. Little by little, a network of allies began to form, united by the belief that justice and equality should guide the actions of the police force. Some officers, encouraged by Angela's courage, came forward with their own stories of discrimination and harassment within the department. However, it was not an easy journey. While some applauded her efforts, others viewed her with suspicion and hostility. Malicious rumors circulated through the halls, questioning their motivations and loyalty. But Angela remained unwavering, knowing she was fighting for a cause bigger than herself. On a particularly difficult night, Angela sat alone in her apartment, holding a steaming cup of tea. Silent tears streamed down her cheeks as she reflected on the challenges she faced. But then her mind turned to the faces of the neighborhood children, their eyes bright with hope and wonder whenever they saw her. It was at that moment that Angela remembered why she chose this career. It wasn't just a job, but a calling to be the change I so longed to see in the world. And she would not rest until every child, regardless of color or background, could feel safe and protected by law enforcement. As the days turned into weeks, Angela felt the weight of the battle she was fighting. Each step toward reform was hard and arduous, fraught with obstacles and resistance. But she knew she couldn't give up, not when so many lives depended on her actions. One morning, while walking through the halls of the police station, Angela heard raised voices coming from the meeting room. Recognizing one of them as Captain Harris's, she approached cautiously, her heart racing. "You don't understand the gravity of the situation," the captain's voice resounded, full of frustration. "If we don't take drastic action, we will completely lose the community's trust." Angela peeked through the half-open door and saw the captain standing, facing a group of senior officers. Their faces were scrunched up in expressions of disbelief and defiance. With all due respect, Captain, one of them spoke, his voice rough as sandpaper. "This Harris crusade is a waste of time and resources. She is just causing unnecessary problems." Angela's heart sank upon hearing the words filled with contempt. She knew she would face resistance, but it still hurt to be treated as a threat by those who were supposed to be her allies. Captain Harris shook his head, his eyes sparkling with determination. "You are blinded by tradition and prejudice. Can't you see that we need to change to survive? If we continue on this path, we will be consumed by corruption and public disrespect." A tense silence hung in the air as the officers exchanged uncertain glances. Angela held her breath, hoping the captain's words would have some impact. Finally, one of the officers stepped forward, his face softened with understanding. "Maybe you're right, Captain. Maybe it's time we hear what Officer Harris has to say." Encouraged, Captain Harris nodded. "Well then, let's listen. She has solid evidence of misconduct and bias within this department. It is our obligation to investigate and take corrective action." Angela felt a wave of relief mixed with a hint of apprehension. Finally, her voice would be heard, but she knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. The real battle was yet to come. Over the next few days, Angela found herself in countless meetings, presenting her findings and answering difficult questions. Some officials were still skeptical, questioning her motivations and accusing her of exaggerating the problems. But little by little, the strength of his evidence and the integrity of his character began to shine through. Gradually, a wave of change began to sweep through the department. New protocols were implemented, mandatory diversity and ethics training was instituted, and an anonymous reporting system was created to encourage transparency. However, Angela knew that these measures were just the beginning. True reform would come from a cultural transformation, a change in mentality that would take time and persistence to be achieved. In her apartment at night, she used to reflect on the challenges she faced, There were times when she felt exhausted and discouraged, questioning whether her actions really made a difference. But then she remembered the hopeful faces of the neighborhood children and the residents who greeted her with warm smiles. In these moments, Angela remembered why she had chosen this journey. It wasn't just a career, but an opportunity to be the change I so longed to see in the world. And with each step she took, she got a little closer to her goal, building a police force that was fair, respected, and worthy of the trust of the community she was sworn to protect. As she walked through the corridors of the police station, she could feel the officers' eyes on her, some curious, others suspicious, but she kept her head up, knowing her fight was just beginning. Upon entering the meeting room, Angela found Captain Harris and a group of veteran officers. Their expressions were a mix of skepticism and cautious hope. The captain greeted her with a wave, his eyes tired but resolute. "Thank you for joining us, Angela," he said, his deep voice filling the room. "As you know, we are facing a crisis of trust within the community. It is time we take concrete steps to reform our department." Angela nodded, her eyes scanning the faces around her. She knew that each of them carried years of experience and tradition, but she was also aware that some of those traditions needed to be challenged. "I understand the magnitude of the challenge that lies ahead," Angela began, her voice firm and confident. "But we cannot ignore the systemic problems of bias and misconduct that erode our credibility. It is our duty to protect and serve everyone, regardless of race, origin, or socioeconomic status." A murmur ran through the group, some officers nodding in agreement while others frowned in doubt. Angela took a deep breath and continued. "I know that many of you have decades of dedicated service to this community. You have seen it all and faced situations that most of us could never imagine. But it is precisely because of this experience that you must understand the need for change." She paused, her eyes meeting each of the officers present. "Our actions define who we are, and if we continue to allow prejudice and corruption to undermine our integrity, we are failing not only the community but ourselves as well." A heavy silence hung in the air as Angela's words reverberated. Then one of the senior officers, Sergeant Reynolds, cleared his throat and sat up straighter in his chair. "You're right, Officer Harris," he said, his voice rough but respectful. "We spend so much time fighting crime that we forget to watch our own ranks. It's time we face our inner demons and rebuild the trust we've lost." A murmur of agreement ran through the group, and Angela felt a surge of hope. For the first time, she saw the real possibility of change, not just in policies and procedures, but in the minds and hearts of those sworn to serve and protect. Captain Harris stood up, his eyes shining with renewed determination. "Very well, then let us begin. Today we will outline a comprehensive plan of action to reform this department. It will not be easy, and there will be resistance, but if we remain united and true to our principles, we will prevail." As the officers gathered around the table, sharing ideas and discussing strategies, Angela felt a sense of purpose like never before. She knew this journey would be long and arduous, filled with obstacles and disappointments. But he also knew that together they could overcome the challenges and build a police force that was truly worthy of trust and respect. In that moment, Angela made a silent promise to herself and the community she swore to protect. She would not rest until every child, regardless of their color or background, could walk the streets without fear. Until each resident felt truly safe and respected by those responsible for keeping them protected. It was an ambitious dream, but Angela believed that with perseverance and courage they could achieve it. And as she looked at the determined faces around her, she knew she wasn't alone on this journey. Together, they would be the change they longed to see in the world.